Hello, my name is 환산스님, and this is Sun Meditation in English. Now, as I've mentioned previously, one of the viewers of our program mentioned that the traditional seated meditation posture is all but impossible for this person to master. It's quite challenging and difficult. So for today, we'll begin our guided meditation in the seated meditation for posture for a chair. Okay? So why don't we begin our guided meditation? If you're sitting in a chair, please choose a very firm and stable chair that doesn't have too soft a cushion. And you want the height of the chair to be so that when you sit on it and place your feet flat on the floor naturally, your knees and your ankles should form roughly right angles. And you want to sit straight. You don't want to lean back into the back of the chair. You want your spine to be upright, freestanding, and extended as far as possible. So this is the basic posture for doing meditation in a chair. And from here on in, everything else is exactly the same as in our traditional meditation posture. So you take the edge of your right hand, place it against your abdomen, take your left hand, place it on top of your right hand, let your thumb tips touch each other to form a rainbow arc, tuck your chin in slightly so that the crown of your head rises slightly higher toward the ceiling, extending your spine even more. Okay? From here, raise your shoulders up to your ears, roll back, and drop. Take the tip of your tongue and place it lightly against the roof of your mouth, just behind your upper row of teeth, and then look straight ahead. As you look straight ahead, your gaze should naturally fall about 3 meters or 10 feet on the floor in front of you. And as you look forward with a soft and comfortable gaze, don't stare at any point or object or pattern in the floor. Just let your field of vision present itself to you. So this is our basic meditation posture for sitting in a chair. And now we will enter into preparation breathing. It is an extremely effective method for regulating our minds and our bodies, especially for beginning meditators, and especially at times when we are experiencing intense emotional distress. Now, when we use preparation breathing to deal directly with a difficult emotional state, the things we need to bear in mind are, first, do the breathing a little bit slower than normal, and do it a little bit more softly. You don't want to be breathing hard and fast because there's a danger of hyperventilating. And the second thing we need to bear in mind when we use preparation breathing to deal with our emotions is that we should do it as often as we need. So that could be 5 times or 10 times or even 20 times, as much as you need to get through this difficult moment. So to do preparation breathing once again, we inhale through the nose and completely fill our chest. We hold, and then we exhale through our mouth and completely empty our chest. Once again, we're going to be doing this very softly and very gently. Okay? So why don't we begin? So together, inhale, hold, and then exhale. Inhale, hold, and then exhale. As we exhale, imagine that the day's worries and stresses are leaving your mind and body with your out-breath, and really feel your body relax, unwind, and settle down. Okay, so once again, inhale, hold, and then exhale. Observe all these changes in ourselves as we practice this breathing. Once more, inhale, hold, and then exhale. And now in formal meditation posture, we will engage our abdominal breathing. So in abdominal breathing, we will be breathing entirely through the nose. And when we inhale, we'll inhale slowly and gently. And as we inhale, we extend our lower belly and then hold for 2 to 3 seconds. And then when we exhale through the nose, we pull our lower bellies in toward our spine for a longer out-breath. Okay, so why don't we begin? Inhale, hold, and then exhale. Once more, inhale. Hold. And then exhale. We can see that this is a much deeper and more powerful form of breathing. Now we can begin to hold our hwadu, the object of our meditation, imoko. So why don't we say imoko aloud as we enter into formal meditation now? So inhale, hold, and then together, imoko. What is this? What is this that directs my body? What is this that thinks my thoughts, experiences my feelings? When I see an image in my mind, what is this that's looking at that image? That's what we're asking when we ask imoko. Remember to take the last syllable, G-O, and trail it to the end of your out-breath. One more time. Inhale. Hold. And then together, imoko. And once again, I will ask our viewers for the remainder of this program to continue maintaining this posture, this abdominal breathing, and to continue to ask the question, imoko, in your minds, and continue to meditate. And I will remind you that we're not just mechanically asking imoko, what is this, in our minds over and over again. We are trying to create the state of doubt. We are trying to create the state of feeling blocked because we are trying to know the unknowable, to see the invisible. So the way to do that is to ask imoko to ourselves with the greatest sincerity and urgency and intensity and concentration possible with every out-breath. Okay? So please continue to meditate. Now, today's topic for contemplation and meditation is actually one of the most important issues that all meditators face, not just beginners. And that is this feeling or this feeling that I have a problem, that I am repeating the same mistakes over and over and over again in my life and in my practice. When I meditate, I can feel that it's good for me. I want to go on. I feel hope. I feel a brightness. I imagine the kind of person that I can become, the kind of person that I always wanted to be. But somehow when I get off the meditation mat and get back into my daily life, I find myself making the same mistakes, having the same problems. And it doesn't feel like anything's changing. And I'm just kind of bouncing back and forth between this feeling that I get in meditation and then almost the exact opposite in my daily life. And then there are the days when meditation just doesn't go well at all. I feel like I'm improving. I feel like I'm getting the posture and the breathing down. And then suddenly it's like the first day again. My body hurts. The breathing doesn't feel right. I can't get my body to move the right way. And no matter how hard I try, I can't keep my mind on imoko. So a lot of times, I wonder and I'm worried whether I'm doing it right. So this is an extremely common problem and issue for all meditators, even the most seasoned ones. And just to share some of what I went through in my own life and trying to learn this practice, when I first became a monk and was living with my Dharma brothers, I was the youngest one at our monastery. I knew nothing about Korea or Korean culture or even Buddhism for that matter, except on the level of theory. I didn't know anything about Buddhism as an actual practiced religion. And over the first few years that I was here, I began to notice, in a sort of immature and judgmental way, but I began to notice that my fellow practitioners seemed to be repeating the same mistakes over and over again, the same what appeared to me to be dysfunctional patterns of behavior. And I was really quite surprised by that because I thought, well, we're meditating under an enlightened master. Why aren't we changing? Why aren't they changing? And then as time passed, I began to realize that I was doing exactly the same thing, that I was repeating the same mistakes over and over again, that I was hitting a certain wall over and over again. And so then that became a very strong source of concern for me. And so we all experience it at one time or another, this sense that we are not progressing, that somehow we're just running in circles. This is a very common feeling to have in this particular form of meditation, because the tradition teaches us that it's not a gradual, like, staircase of upward development. It's not like going through the grades of a school or going through the ranks of an organization or a corporation. There are no signs of visible progress. The most common phrase in Korean for describing the journey that this practice entails is, after you cross one mountain, you hit another mountain. And there are mountains and valleys. There are days when we do well, and there are days when we seem to do poorly, and it can be very disheartening on the human level. So in order for us to deal with this kind of situation, these ups and downs in our practice, I would like to share with you actually an anecdote concerning my teacher when he actually shared a teaching with me. One day when I was, this was actually before I became a Sinim, so he sat me down and he said, there are three basic kinds of practitioners. Okay? There are the high-level practitioners, those of high spiritual capacity. And those kind of practitioners, when they see a fire, a burning flame in front of them, they look at it, they feel the heat, and no matter how beautiful that fire may look, they know it's dangerous, they don't try to touch it, they just walk around it and go on their way. And those are the spiritual practitioners of highest capacity. And then there are the practitioners of intermediate capacity, middle capacity. And those kind of practitioners, they see the fire, they feel the heat, and they know it's dangerous. They know that it can hurt a person. But the fire is so beautiful. It's dancing, it looks like a dancing flower, it's entrancing. And they stare at it, they get hypnotized by it, and just once they reach out and touch it. And it burns their hand, and they recoil, and they realize, this flame may look very alluring and beautiful, but it's obviously quite dangerous. And so they move on. They found out through one experience that the fire can be dangerous to them. And then my teacher pointed out there are those of the lowest capacity, low capacity practitioners. And they see that fire, and they become entranced by that dancing flame and the light and the colors. And they know it's dangerous too. They know there's a possibility of getting hurt, but they just can't help it. They want to touch it, and they touch it. And they recoil, and it hurts them. But the thing is, they don't learn from one experience. They look at it, and then they forget again. They see the fire burning in front of them, hypnotizing them, and so again they reach out to it. They try to embrace it. They jump into the flames only to get burned up. Second and third degree burns. They come rolling out, screaming and weeping and vowing that they'll never do this again. I will never, ever do this again. I will change. Only to find that just a few moments later or sometime later, they see that flame again, and again they jump in. And again they get burned, and it happens over and over and over again until, they're burnt to a crisp and they're filled with suffering and distress. So Sun Master Songdam described that situation to me. And he says, which kind of practitioner do you think you are? And so I was quite young. I was in my early 20s, and I thought, well, I can't say that I'm the highest one, because that would be bragging. But I don't think I'm the lowest one either. So I'm going to say I'm the middle one. So I said, I think I'm the middle one. And he kind of threw his head back and started laughing. And I later learned that in this world, there are very, very few people of high or intermediate spiritual capacity. The vast majority of us are of the lowest capacity. We must learn over and over and over again what causes suffering and what does not cause suffering. The flame is a metaphor for objects of pleasure, objects that give us pleasure. They are objects of our desire. And in traditional Korean Buddhism, they list 5 basic forms of pleasure. So the first would be the pleasure of eating food. The second would be the pleasure of sleeping or lying around in comfortable surroundings. The third is romantic and sexual pleasure. The fourth is the pleasure of fame and power. And the fifth is the pleasure of wealth. And the distinguishing characteristic of these pleasures is that although in the short term they might be very exciting and attractive and pleasurable, in the long term they cause us great harm and suffering. So they are considered dangerous and to be handled with extreme care. And for dedicated spiritual practitioners, we are advised to avoid them whenever possible. But we are people of the lowest spiritual capacity, and this is not to put ourselves down. This is simply to recognize that we can't get the lesson learned in one shot. Learning on a spiritual level is not like learning in school or in a workplace. You're not just inputting information into your brain. You're not just picking up a skill. You are trying to change your way of looking at the world, of relating to the world, your whole set of priorities and values, all the way down to the unconscious or non-conscious level. You are asking for a shift in the entire structure of our consciousness. This will not happen overnight. This has to be confirmed for us through repeated experience. And for us, that means repeated experiences of pain until finally we learn. In the Buddhist context, finally we learn over successive lifetimes what causes us suffering and what does not cause us suffering. So if we can understand where we stand on that scale of spiritual capacity, we can begin to know why we repeat the same mistakes. Now, Sun Master Songdam also teaches us, because the temptation in I'm the least, I'm the lowest spiritual capacity, I have no hope at all, so maybe I should just give up. The lowest capacity doesn't mean that you are unable to get to enlightenment. It just means you're going to have to work very, very hard. And Sun Master Songdam teaches us in his Dharma speeches that the greatest sin we can possibly commit is to give up on ourselves. That's not just his own formulation. That's what the Sun Buddhist tradition as a whole teaches us. That the sin of giving up on ourselves, thinking that we are incapable of getting enlightenment, is actually worse than killing the Buddha or killing our own parents. Now, in a traditional Confucian Asian culture, where parents are held to be the highest figures of veneration, there's nothing worse than killing our parents. And that holds true for almost any culture in the world, actually. And then, of course, within the Buddhist context, there can be nothing worse than killing the Buddha. But according to Sun tradition, it's even worse to give up on ourselves. Because according to the traditional Buddhist worldview, even if we were to kill our parents or to kill the Buddha, we would in our next life go to hell. But in the Buddhist tradition, hell also has a time limit. The time limit is unimaginably long, but there is actually a limitation. And one day, when the causes and conditions that have led us to go into hell have all been eliminated, then the individual is released from hell and free to be reborn in other realms of being. So even if you go into hell, there is still hope. One day that imprisonment ends and we can start again on our quest for enlightenment. But if you give up on yourself, then there's no hope at all. Because it is only through our own personal effort that we can grow, learn to deal with our suffering in a wise way, actualize the best within ourselves, gain wisdom and compassion, and finally gain enlightenment. So giving up on ourselves puts that whole enterprise to an end. And it is the one thing that we absolutely must avoid. Why don't we take a break here? And then when we get back from the break, we will consider what we can do to avoid getting so exhausted that we want to give up. And of course, in the second half of this program, I will assume the traditional meditation posture. To once again consider what we can do in our practice to maintain our confidence in our ability to progress in our meditation, to maintain our determination and the hope that we too, like the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas and the spiritual masters of the past, like them, we too can gain enlightenment for ourselves in this lifetime. What can we do to maintain faith and hope in ourselves? And on this, for this very important question, I would like to give as practical advice as I can manage. So the first thing that I would like to recommend to our lay practitioners, those of us who live in society, is if you're very serious about your meditation, then try to structure your life so that you can take occasional meditation retreats in community settings that are driven, very with austerity and discipline. So now this type of retreat is offered in a wide variety of venues now in most countries, I believe. So you could do something as simple as taking one day a week and perhaps a day of your weekend, going to a meditation center that you like and spending the day in meditation there. It would be even better if they have some kind of program. Another thing that you can do is take a weekend retreat, perhaps once a month. Once again, in many countries, there are such types of meditation retreats are offered. And so the idea is to take yourself out of your life and put yourself in an environment where you can concentrate exclusively, entirely upon your meditation without having the distractions of your normal life come intruding upon your practice and intruding into our consciousness. So to give ourselves opportunities for intense practice like that. If you're even more dedicated, what you can do is use your vacation time or something like that and take a week-long retreat every once in a while, perhaps every 3 months or every 4 months. And that is an exceptionally intensive way to meditate. And one will find if you do that on a regular basis, you will feel a clearer sense of progression, a sense that you really are walking on a coherent path in a definite direction. And if you want to go beyond that, you can even enter a month-long retreat or even a year-long retreat. There are very many different ways to do this, but the important thing is that it has been a part of traditional Asian Buddhist culture that even lay practitioners take off time, go into the mountains or into a meditation compound and spend their time exclusively on meditation. So this is something that I very much want to recommend to our viewers. In the past, I have emphasized that it's possible to conduct a robust meditation practice at home. But definitely, if you can do this, where you can go to a community setting and practice with others under guidance from direct Dharma masters or teachers, it will only enhance and enrich your meditation experience that much more. And so while we're on this topic of practicing in a community setting, I really want to emphasize that it's very important, if we're going to take our meditation practice seriously, to find or create a community of like-minded meditation practitioners. Now, there's a very special term for a spiritual co-practitioner in Korean Buddhism, and that is called, in Korean, Doban, D-O-B-A-N, and that is literally translated as a friend on the path, a companion on our spiritual path. And having such a companion allows us to give one another support and encouragement and push each other to keep going. It's much easier to do this kind of practice when you're with like-minded individuals. So this may not be the easiest thing to do because every Buddhist monastic longs to find their spiritual companions. But it's not always easy, especially for this form of meditation, because it's not yet widespread throughout the world. Nonetheless, if you look hard enough, you should be able to find other practitioners who are interested in doing this. And you could even found your own community or your own meditation group to do this. The idea of Doban, or companion on the spiritual path, is extremely profound and actually very wide in scope. It literally means someone that you meditate with, someone that you're meditating with in the same meditation hall or monastery or center. But it means anyone that pushes you on your path to enlightenment. So our greatest Doban, or our greatest friend on the spiritual path, is the Buddha and the Bodhisattvas and all of the enlightened spiritual masters of the past. And then beyond that, of course, are the practitioners who practice with us. But if we have if we have a deep and profound faith in this type of practice and in these teachings, then we can understand that anyone we meet is a doban, a fellow practitioner, that life itself is our fellow practitioner, that every moment that we meet is our fellow practitioner, every object, every existing thing, because everything teaches us something. At any moment, if we are meditating, we are able to allow that thing, that moment, that person, that living being, that master, that student, be our teacher and teach us something about the nature of human existence, the nature of humanity, the nature of reality, and the nature of our own consciousness. So once again, this idea is very broad in scope, but for our purposes today, it's best to think of in terms of finding co-practitioners. And to make a final illustration about the importance of finding a co-practitioner, I would like to share with you a famous anecdote involving the Buddha and his disciple. One day, one of his disciples, who was very, very moved and grateful that he was able to study under the Buddha with such fine Dharma brothers and sisters, with such fine fellow disciples of the Buddha. So he went to the Buddha and he said to the Buddha, in all modesty, I think that finding a co-practitioner is just like getting halfway to enlightenment. And the Buddha said, no, it's not. And so this disciple thought, maybe I overstepped my bounds. Maybe I've presumed to know too much. So he was a little taken aback. But then the Buddha said, finding a doban, finding a co-practitioner is like getting all the way to enlightenment. That's how important this is considered within the Korean Buddhist tradition. So this is something I would also like to advise our viewers, that if you find co-practitioners, definitely it will support our practice, our progress along the path when things get hard. So these are sort of things that we can do in our external lives, go on retreats and find a community of practitioners. Internally now, I would like to talk about the kind of attitude that we need to take if we're to persevere on this often difficult path. And in Buddhism, especially in Sun Buddhism, most famously, the tradition teaches us that the best mindset, the best mind frame to have is that of a beginner, is that of someone who is just starting, who is being exposed to these teachings for the very first time. Every time we sit down to meditate, every time we learn about the Dharma or some other aspects of these teachings, we should approach it with the openness and naivete and lack of assumptions and preconceived ideas that a beginner has, that a pure beginner has. Within the Korean Buddhist monastic tradition, what we sinims or Buddhist monks say is that if we really want to get enlightened, then we have to stay a novice, an initiate, which in Korean is called haengja. It is the lowest level on the monastic hierarchy. It's the absolute beginner's level. We have to stay a novice until the day we're enlightened. That's what we are. And then if you want to take that a step further, the sinims say, no, we're going to stay a novice until the day we become fully actualized as Buddhas in our own right. So this is how seriously this idea of the beginner's mind is taken. Within Sun Buddhism, the idea is not to become, have the knowledge of an expert, to accumulate knowledge and experience, and to develop very sophisticated and refined views about spirituality and the nature of consciousness. This is considered a very misconceived idea of what meditation is about. Within the Sun Buddhist tradition, the more we practice, the less we should know. We are emptying the contents of our mind, opening up the contents of our mind, not filling them up. We're not trying to clog our minds with information and knowledge and opinions and so forth. And so the more we practice, rather than becoming more sophisticated, we should become more simple. Rather than becoming more knowledgeable, we should become more innocent and pure. Rather than holding than developing the wit and skepticism of a hardened veteran, we should become more trusting, more sincere. more hopeful. These are the signs of progress on the path to meditation. And in Buddhism, like probably almost all world religious traditions, the sophisticated intellectual, the veteran, the hardened veteran is not held up as the highest ideal of meditation practice. In Sun Buddhism, they say that if you're truly great at meditation, you will have the mind of a child. Full of wonder and curiosity and innocence and trust, no duplicity. That's the direction that we want to be going in, and that's the kind of mind that we need to maintain in our practice. That is the great challenge that we face. So then how would we do that? How do we maintain the mind of a child, the mind of a beginner, when every day actually we're accumulating experience? And the first thing that I would like to advise in that regard is that we make a practice of reflecting on ourselves, reflecting on the way we're practicing. To look back on the day or on the week and think, well, on those occasions when I slipped up, what were the causes and conditions of that? What can I do to change my behavior? And to constantly have this idea of improving upon oneself, that we are just beginners. We're always beginners, so we have to keep working at it. The posture, the breathing, holding the hwadu, the way we interact with other people, the way we engage in our work. All of those things we have to reflect upon over and over again as beginners. So that's number one, self-reflection. Number two, if you want to hold beginner's mind, the best way is simply to hold the hwadu. Because every time you hold imoko, you are instantly disengaging from other thoughts and emotions. You are not allowing other thoughts, opinions, views to accumulate within you. In any given moment, your mind is open to experience, open to the world, open to the living moment. So this is the way that we need to practice in order to maintain beginner's mind in our practice. Now, the final recommendation that I would like to share with you is a very, very important concept in Korean Buddhism. And in Korean, it's called ha-shim, which literally means to put down your mind, lower your mind. And this term has many meanings. It is a very rich and profound word. But for today's purposes, I will just say that this is the Korean Buddhist conception of what we call in English humility or modesty. Now, it's the first thing that we are taught, that monastics are taught when we ordain as monks, that we first become novices, and as novices in the Buddhist monastery, we're put to work in the kitchen, and we are basically servants to everybody. And we must defer to everybody's opinion, we have to follow everybody's orders, and we are given very little opportunity to express our own thoughts and feelings. And in this way, from the first step, we are taught to put down our thoughts and feelings, to keep putting down everything and defer to others. And that does involve being very humble, being very yielding, being very accommodating to others. But this idea of hashim, or humility, is not simply lowering yourself below others. It's not simply deferring to others. The idea behind hashim is that we all have the seeds of negative karma within us. And the tradition tells us that the karma that we are facing, the bad habits, the habits that cause suffering, the habits of thought, feeling, speech, action, and behavior, are said to be higher than mountains, more expansive than the sky, deeper than the ocean. And the term they use is sin. They say that our sins are higher than the mountain, deeper than the ocean, more expansive than the sky. Now, in our modern day and age, nobody really likes to hear the word sin. And when we do hear it, we feel like this religion is trying to put a guilt trip on us. But that was never the purpose. That was never the purpose of coming up with this idea of sin. Within Buddhism, when we say that we have this massive amount of sin or karma within us, it's not saying that we are sinners, that is what we are. We are not sin, we have sin. We have the seeds, the potential for misbehavior within our consciousness. In reality, we are Buddha. And it is because we are Buddha, and it is through our Buddha nature, that we can eliminate those seeds of negative karma. but we must understand what we are facing, that often we are the lowest level of spiritual practitioner because we are beginners. Our mind is completely filled with karma, with dysfunctional habits. If you look out into the world and you see horror and evil and terrible behavior, according to Buddhism, that is because we carry the seeds of those kinds of things within our own consciousness. The reality that we experience is always the reflection of our mode and quality of consciousness. So if we see something bad in the world, it's only because it already exists within us. And we must come to terms with the challenge that we are facing when we decide to pursue enlightenment, to pursue meditation. My own teacher, Sun Master Songdam, when he first became a monk, said within our community, this is sort of a famous thing that he said, I am the lowest of the low-level spiritual practitioners. Now, when you hear something like that, you think it's very self-effacing and it's like this way of, this very extreme expression of humility. But I would like to think that it's actually the greatest expression of hope. That you would only face what's worst in yourself if you had some sense that there was something that was better than all of that. And that it is an expression of hope that you can face negative karma as high as mountains, as great as the sky, with some level of confidence and conviction. So this is the importance of this teaching. If I go into my practice thinking I'm better than others, that I'm very intelligent, that I'm very capable, that I'm very strong, and that I can do this better than others, inevitably, we will be deeply disappointed and discouraged when we start making the same mistakes over and over and over again. But if we go in with the mind of a beginner, and we go in with the mind of hashim, or humility, and we understand that we are the lowest level of practitioner, then when we encounter this very painful and difficult process of trial and error in our meditation, we will not be disappointed in ourselves. We will understand this is the nature of the game. And so we will be unshaken in our practice. It's only when we begin to think too well of ourselves that we become so profoundly disappointed. And this is why, especially in the teaching that I was trained in, that we are taught to hold this idea of humility, this idea of beginner's mind, this idea that I am of a lower level of spiritual capacity to the very end. It will actually help us in our progression and give us strength. Now, as a final teaching to share with our viewers, I would like to quote, actually many years ago, Sun Master Songdam suddenly recited this thing to me in English, and it's kind of stayed in my head, and I would now like to share it with our viewers. And the quote goes like this: it is difficult to follow the way to enlightenment, but it is more difficult if people have no mind to follow such a way to enlightenment. Without enlightenment, there is endless suffering in this world of life and death. Now, I've thought about this over the years, and I think basically what it's trying to say is that there are two kinds of suffering, two basic kinds of suffering. There is a kind of needless suffering that only leads to more suffering. There is the suffering of unwise choices and behavior that leads to destructive consequences and makes us want to escape those consequences, leading us to more unwise choices and behaviors. And so suffering, this type of suffering leads to more suffering and draws us into darkness and hopelessness. So there's that kind of suffering. And then there is the suffering of struggle, of practicing, of trying to overcome our negative karma, our self-defeating habits. There is the suffering, the pain of healing and recovering, of learning this technique and this art and this tradition of overcoming suffering, of learning how to grow and develop as human beings, of actualizing our total potential, and finally gaining the ability to love and to know and to see and to live, and finally gaining wisdom and compassion, and finally gaining enlightenment, which is said to be the full blossoming of what a human being can be. There is that suffering, the suffering of striving. And what Sun Master Songdam and all the spiritual masters of the past tell us is we must choose between those two. There is no painless way to live, but we can choose what kind of suffering we'll take upon ourselves. And this choice is not simply deciding, well, I'm going to become a monk, or I'm going to become Buddhist, or I'm going to learn how to practice meditation. This choice is made in every single moment. Where will I direct my attention? Will I direct my attention to the endless random stream of thoughts, images, emotions, and voices in my head? Or will I redirect my attention to Imoko over and over and over again? Both involve struggle and expenditure of energy, but one leads to wisdom and compassion, the other leads to darkness and delusion and confusion. So this is a choice that we must be making at every moment, and that ultimately is how we keep from giving up on this path. It is the Hwadu, it is Imoko ultimately, that gives us reason to hope. So I think we've run out of time again. So once again, I thank you, all the members of our studio audience and the viewers who have watched today's program with us. And I will once again close with the traditional Buddhist greeting. May we all attain the Buddha.